What's up, y'all? It's Carla, aka Sila the Poet, and I'm going to speak about Native American identity. So, I am Afro Latina. I do also have African American and Native American ancestry in my DNA. So, I found out about some of the tribes that are in my family. One of them is called the Saponi Indian tribe. Okay. And it is a state recognized tribe as well as a federally recognized tribe. And they are in Virginia and North Carolina. Okay. So historically, they were matrilineal. They believed in reincarnation in the afterlife, right? The art that they would have, they used deer hides, feather cloaks, and traditional let me see traditional types of artistic materials. Okay, they also speak a Siouan language. Okay, so some of the surnames were Mayo, Collins, Chavis, Taborn, Simmons, Pettiford, Haith, Jeffries, Stewart, Goings. And I have a whole bunch of cousins that have all of those surnames that come from that area, North Carolina. A lot of my cousins come from North Carolina and Virginia, right? So the tribal chief of the Occaneechi Indian tribe is Chief Joel Bass, right? So in 1705, Virginia, right, prevented Negro, mulattoes, and Indians from holding any political office, right? And mixed race individuals, right, with Indian heritage, whether white or black, were classified as mulatto. So you could have been Native American, you could have been indigenous, but because you had maybe one parent that was white or one parent that was black, they were going to automatically label you as mulatto, even though that's not the only thing that you were. So basically, the label of mulatto is telling you that you're black and white, even though you have Indian descent, even though that you're a part of a tribe. It was a way to kind of erase or interfere with tribal identity. Okay. Eventually, that changed, where once a person had one white parent and one Native American parent, then there were protections for them. Then they could be labeled as Indian as long as they had one fourth blood of Indian. They could be labeled Indian, but as long as you had one fourth black blood, then you're gonna be considered colored. You know. So I learned that about some of the tribes in that area. I found out that my great grandmother, Cordy White, okay, according to my grandpa, she was a Saponi. She was from that tribe, the Native American tribe. She wasn't labeled that way though. She was labeled colored because she, I believe, had more than one fourth black blood. Even though she was a part of that tribe, she actually was involved in the tribal ways and stuff like that. But they, labeled her colored. Okay. Also in my family, I have Arawak, okay, Taino, right? On both sides. So my great great grandmother, Huberta Reese, she was part Arawak. And on my father's side, my father is Puerto Rican, I have cousins that are Taino, okay? So with the Taino Indians, they farmed cassava, corn, tobacco, sweet potatoes, and the chiefs were called caciques, right? And they built houses from palm and cane. They were expert fishermen, and they would catch turtles, right? Unfortunately, when Columbus and the other colonists came to the islands, they brought smallpox and the measles with them. And because the Indian people did not have the immunity, it decimated populations, okay? And it led to a lot of death, as well as the Spanish colonists were pillaging their villages, burning the villages down, and unaliving Native Americans and not feeding them enough to survive because of forced labor and slavery. So these are things that happened to the Tainos, but the Taino people still lived on. They claimed that they were extinct. That was a lie. They're not extinct. The Taino people, it lives on in the DNA of the people that live in Puerto Rico and in some of the people that live in some of the Caribbean islands, depending on if you have, ancestors that were Taino or not. Okay? One of the last tribes that I found out that's in my family is Nansemond, right? So Nansemond tribe was federally recognized in Virginia in 1985, and the federal government, gave it recognition as a tribe in 2018. And that tribe had an Algonquian culture, okay? They were from the Powhatan Paramount Chiefdom, okay? Now, John Bass was a English minister who married Elizabeth, who was the daughter of the Nansemond tribe. Okay, so you had half Anglo, half Native American people, and then they eventually mixed with the African Americans that lived in that area. There were Anglo and Powhatan wars between 1610 to 1646, and the English displaced the Nansemond from their ancestral lands, so they did a lot of migrations. Half of the tribes adopted English ways and English lifestyles, while the other tribe stayed true to their traditional tribal lifestyles. So when I think about, all of these different tribes that, that I have cousins and that are in my family, it just makes me think about hidden histories. I didn't know about any of this stuff until I took DNA tests and started finding out my cousins and started finding out that some of them are in these tribes, right? It made me think about, the tribal ways that were not taught to me, that were not passed down to me, because the ancestors that were Native American have passed away. And so I never got to learn any of that. And because, like I said, me being classified as black, as African American, or whatever, which is fine because I'm proud to be black, I'm proud to be African American, and Afro Latino, African, it's the classification for me is difficult because it's like my family is very mixed. I consider myself an Afro Latino because of both cultures I was raised in, which is Jamaican American, the African American neighborhood I grew up in, and Puerto Rican culture. I consider myself that. But the government, treats me as if I'm African American. So a lot of times it's not always easy to just identify, myself. But it's like I have to reclaim everything. I'm looking at the death records. I'm talking to some senior citizens in my family, talking to my cousins that are in the family. And it's just, you have to reclaim all of this history, all of this stuff, just to try to figure out, who came before you, who you really are. And it's just really deep. These are peoples and tribes and cultures that they basically try to erase, by federal laws and federal paper. But anyway, that's all I have to say for now. Okay, there'll be more content later. Peace.